Hi, my name is Meditech, Site Lead for Riverside Healthcare. This video is going to review some Meditech functions for those that are new to this program or to the version that we're using, as well as walk you through some order entry instructions specific to this site. So just to get you oriented geographically, Riverside Healthcare is located in Fort Frances, which is in northwestern Ontario, close to the Manitoba border and about 350 kilometers west of Thunder Bay. They are in the Central Time Zone, which is 1 hour behind Eastern Standard Time. The pharmacy is staffed with 2 technicians Monday to Friday, and a pharmacist is on site Monday to Wednesday only. Thursday and Friday, a pharmacist at the Thunder Bay Regional Hospital covers remotely. The pharmacy is not staffed over the weekend, but they do handle their own on-call. Occasionally, the tech might get called in to dispense something that is needed stat. So basically, the Northwest Telepharmacist function is to complete the order entry over the weekend to reduce the backlog for Monday mornings, as well as to follow up on any new or ongoing acute clinical issues. So to get Meditech open, you first need to log into Citrix. IT services for Fort Frances is divided between Riverside's own IT department, which handles the remote desktop access and DocuScripts, and Thunder Bay Regional Hospital, which administers Citrix and Meditech for the entire Northwest Ontario region. So if you have any issues with Citrix or Meditech, I've included Thunder Bay's IT contact information in the summary sheet, which is located in the shared drive. I'll just show it to you here. This includes a section where you can enter in your own credential information. This area contains all of the nursing units, contact info, and then all the IT department contact info is here, as well as some individual staff at the hospital. Click on the Meditech Live icon to open Meditech. For whatever reason, sometimes it may take a few tries to get Meditech up and running. It seems to start loading and then it stops and disappears off the screen. So just click on the icon again and it starts up eventually. It's a little finicky that way for some reason. Got one up already. The normal Meditech is blue in color, but I'm in the Meditech test module now, so it looks a bit different. Click or arrow down to CST, right arrow to open the next menu. Here you should only be seeing the Riverside Healthcare when you log on, and Pharmacy Desktop. Riverside Healthcare is a multi-site network which includes 3 sites that we cover. The main hospital is in Fort Frances and it's called Laverendrye General Hospital. The 2 satellite sites are Emo Health Center and Rainy River Health Center. All 3 sites are contained in the same Meditech location, so you don't have to have multiple windows open or try to figure out where a patient is located in order to find them. So the first patient that you look up after opening the program is done using the patient profile button. This is also the button you'll click to get back into the main profile screen after using some of the other functions. From then on, to look up the next patient, you'll use the Select Patient button. To look up a patient, you can use the first few letters of their last name, comma, and then the first name. You can use the account number, which always begins with YA, regardless of the hospital site. This is also the number used in DocuScript to identify the orders. The account number is specific to a single admission. You can also pull up a list of admitted patients by location by typing L and /, and then the location code. For the main hospital, Laverendrye Hospital, the code is LH, AN for the main medical unit. So this is a list of all the patients that are admitted in that unit. Then you can look up ICU. CC is for chronic care, and OB is for the obstetric unit. For EMO, the code is EHAC, and for Rainy River, it's RRAC. They only have one medical unit. If you look up patient by name and more than one item shows up, the one that you want to select is the admit in status. We're going to look up Baloo the bear and do some work on his profile today. So first I'll show you a few useful functions before getting into the details of order entry. This is the main profile screen. The drug profile shows up here with active meds first, then discontinued and canceled meds underneath. Sometimes the location information doesn't show up under the patient's name here. So you can click on the little I. Location information will show up here. Height and weight will show up as well if they've been entered into the profile. The most recent blood work will show up in this main screen. And if you want to look up any further details, you can click on the EMR button on the right. This will open up a new screen where you can access all the information on the patient's electronic medical record. Laboratory information, microbiology, other reports would contain physicians' write-ups. You can look up information on diagnosis and patient history. Medications will bring up their drug profile here as well. I sometimes use this to check something on the patient's profile if I'm in the middle of entering a long list of meds and I don't want to exit out of the order entry screen, which would cancel all my work. So this EMR button is available while you're doing order entry, so it's a pretty handy shortcut. So we need to X out of this screen in order to return to the main patient profile screen. This patient doesn't have any interventions linked to any particular orders, but if there are, you would see an intervention notation here under the status. You could also look up interventions here, which would bring up all the details. Unfortunately, there's nothing entered for this patient, but that might bring up some useful information if you're trying to investigate something on that patient. So we click on the patient profile to return to the main screen. The RX audit button is useful for looking at the history of any changes to medication. So we can look at the Ramipril, click on RX audit, and here it'll show you full history of when the medication was entered, any modifications that were done to it, when it was discontinued, canceled, etc. So this function can be helpful if you're trying to look back and make sense of something in a patient's order entry history. So everything on this screen is accessible either by mouse, pointing and clicking, or by keyboard, whatever is your preference. With the keyboard, you can toggle between 3 different areas. So this right-hand menu here, the bottom menu, and the central screen, which is the current orders. So as you hit F8, you can see that the highlighted area changes every time. And when this menu is highlighted, you could see each one letter on each of these buttons is underlined, and that indicates the keystroke required to activate that function. So, for example, if I wanted to enter a new order, I would hit F8 until the right-hand menu is highlighted, type N for enter orders, and then either E or S down here. E is for entering individual items, and S is for sets. Escape key gets you back to the previous screen. Let's say if I wanted to discontinue the Ramipril, I could hit F8 until I've highlighted the drug profile screen, arrow down to the Ramipril, F8 again to highlight the bottom menu, C to change status, and then discontinue and enter. Not everybody likes to use the keyboard functions, but it does save time and energy if you get tired of going back and forth between keyboard and the mouse. The keyboard shortcuts, I think, are pretty similar to older versions of Meditech that are more keyboard oriented, but not all the keystrokes are the same, so keep that in mind. For example, F11, I think, is used in the other versions of Meditech in the same way as an escape key, but here F11 opens up the EMR, so you have to get used to that. I've posted a cheat sheet for keyboard functions in the shared drive for your reference. Okay, next I'll show you how to change from mode individual to mode batch. So I can discontinue more than one order at a time if I wanted to. I can either mouse, point and click, or I can arrow up and down and space bar to highlight or unhighlight an item. If you're in the mode individual, you'll notice that it takes you through one item at a time. So if I'm discontinuing, oh, it looks I must be in the full batch mode already. So we'll check in preferences. In settings 2, I was in batch, so you can change between batch and individual. I like to be in batch mode. You can make this session or this change active for this session only, or you can make it permanent for every time that you log in. One other handy feature in this section is that you can set how far back the inactive orders show up on a patient's profile by changing the number of hours here. So you could put in anything, sometimes, 350, usually I think 24 is the default. 72 is pretty reasonable. So we'll save those changes. Okay, now I'll go through some basic order entry functions and at the same time showing you some preferences specific to Riverside. So to start entering a new order, click on enter and enter again. So this brings you to the search screen for the drugs. You can look up by generic or brand name. Just start typing whatever you want and the list narrows down as you type. So I'm going to look for ASA. The first little quirk that Riverside has is that when an order is written for a daily low dose ASA, they will not select the enteric coated tablet unless it is specified in the order. If it just says ASA 81 PO daily, they want us to enter the 80 milligram chewable tablet. Excuse me. You can either click on your selection or arrow down and enter. Next, you select the order type. So there's two order types used at Riverside. Med is for any regular scheduled oral tablets or capsules, as well as patches. And Z is for everything else. So PRNs, IV meds, topicals, inhalers, etc. Basically anything that is not a scheduled tablet or capsule. With the exception of patients' own meds, they are also type Z, even if they are regularly scheduled. In the next screen, we fill in the rest of the order. The dose, route, and frequency is pre-built for many drugs, so that speeds things up. The start date does not need to be adjusted unless you are working on a new admission. In that case, I usually change it to the first dose time of the day. So this is showing tomorrow, so type in T for today. The reason for this is that the nurses often will be waiting for us to print MR for that day once we complete the order entry. So once you've entered all your information, type F12 to file the order. Now you're back at the order session summary, and you can continue entering all the items in the order before filing the whole session. If you need to make a change to something, you can go back to edit or delete items that were entered in error using these buttons down here. You can also edit drugs after they've been filed, and I'll show you that as well. So next, we're going to talk about the inventory field. So let's say we have an order for fluoxetine 20 milligrams daily. So we'll select that drug, order type med, okay, so here you'll notice excuse me, that the inventory field says RHF, which means it is pulling from the main pharmacy stock, which we do not want. And there's also a dispense quantity that defaults in. So we do not want to have a quantity in this field ever, except in unusual circumstances. Because there is no pharmacy staff in on the weekend, nurses don't have access to anything except for what's in the dispensing cabinets on the unit. So there should always be a cabinet listed in the inventory field. If you accidentally fill an order like this, I'll just do the interactions here. I'll show you this quickly. This brings up a list. You can hit F9 or click on the arrow key to bring up a list of all the intervention or the interaction codes. Ones that I use most often, if I'm doing a PPMH, patient takes at home, patient is being monitored, or you can just type in RPH. For pharmacist, okay. F12 to bypass. And then I'm just going to enter this or file this session. And you'll see here that it's trying to print a label, which should clue you in that this order was entered incorrectly because the label prints when there's a quantity in the dispense field. So at this point, it's too late to make any changes to the order, but you should click on cancel if you remember to not print the label. If you accidentally print it, don't worry too much about it. So then we can go back to this fluoxetine order. We'll have to cancel it because we can't dispense it this way. So change status and cancel. Yes to auto credit. And then okay to cancel. I'm just going to show you a bit of a different way to handle this as well, just to illustrate another useful function. So instead of canceling this order, you can modify it. But first we need to credit that inventory. We need to get rid of this 9 here and not leave it hanging. Click on debit credit and credit. And then here we put the number of capsules. I don't remember what it was. 9 capsules. And save. So you notice here that the quantity has gone back down to the zeros, which is what we want, but we still don't have access to this medication for the patient. So we're going to edit the order in the right-hand menu. So we need to figure out how to enter this order so the nurses can have access to the drug. So my first thought usually is to check if there is another strength of this drug that is actually stocked in the dispensing cabinets on the nursing unit. So we can click up to the medication field, backspace out of the strength, and type F9 to rescan. And let's try the 10 milligram strength. So if you say yes to load new med defaults, you'll have to re-enter all of your dose and SIG information. So, and if you want to keep it as is, just click no. It'll keep the 20 milligrams and modify it to be 2 capsules per dose now that it's the 10 milligram. Now you'll see that there's actually an inventory dispense cart listed in the inventory field and the 0 in the dispense field. And so everyone's happy now. We'll save that order. Sometimes certain drugs are stocked in one nursing unit, but not in another. And nurses can borrow from another unit until Monday when the techs can supply the stock. This doesn't happen too often, but I'll show you how to change the inventory. So for example, heparin. The 5,000 units per 0.5 mil. Order type is Z. So again, the pharmacy inventory is showing up, and once we put a frequency in here, a quantity will also show up in the dispense amount. Okay, so in the inventory field, to check and see if any other units might have this medication, we would just clear this by hitting backspace and F9. What shows up is a long and confusing list of many different facilities' dispensing cabinets. As I mentioned, all of Northwest Ontario shares the same IT for Meditech, so they all show up here. A couple of other areas where you'll see many facilities information would be in the sets and in the label comments. So one way to narrow it down is to type in MD-LH, and that narrows it down just to our facility. And so now we can see that the ICU machine does have this heparin. So I've been told that ICU and the first floor nursing unit, which is named LHAN, are about 20 feet from each other, and so they have no problem sharing with each other. The summary sheet that I showed you earlier contains all the nursing units, their acronyms, phone extensions, printers, and dispensing carts. So I'd suggest you print it off or have it up on your screen, as you'll probably be referring to it quite often. We'll save this order. Another thing I should mention, when you do something like this, it's a good idea to note it, make a note of it in the Fort Francis issue tracker. This is just a running list that we keep of all the issues that come up, and we print it to the pharmacy printer at the end of the shift on Sunday. Okay, so sometimes you'll find a drug in the lookup list, but it's not located anywhere in any carts in any strength. So one example is topiramate. So we'll just start that. So again, we see there's Riverside inventory showing up, 9 tablets, and I can tell you now, you won't find it in any carts because it's a non-formulary medication. So this one we need to enter as the patient's own medication. So to enter a patient's own med, it is preferable to use the drug dictionary entry if there is one, rather than a generic patient-owned entry, since that will ensure that all the drug interaction checks are happening. So we need to make sure to change the order type to Z. So if you've made a wrong selection in the earlier step, you can change it here still. The inventory will stay as Riverside, but make sure you change this to a 0. And then enter patient's own medication into the label comments. Once you've confirmed with nursing that they do actually have this medication for the patient, the pharmacy wants us to communicate that information to them as well using the weekend issue tracker that I just showed you. So I'm not going to file that yet. Okay, so patients on medication, for those that don't show up in the drug list inventory, here's how to enter that. So let's say cranberry capsules. Obviously, they're not going to have it. So type in PAT, patient on medication. You type in Z. Click back into the title of the drug. We're going to delete the patient on medication and replace it with the name of the drug. Tab into the dose field, 0, and then here we'll enter the same information with the dose. So let's say they want 2 capsules, so we would put 1,000 milligrams here. Fill in the rest of the information. And then the patient's own medication defaults into the label comments. One thing I should mention is when you're typing into this field, make sure that it's as short as possible. I think it's about 15 characters or less, otherwise it won't print properly onto the MAR. Next, I'll show you the pre-built label comments that they use. So first off, we'll look at the antibiotics. So let's enter something like levofloxacin. 500 IV. So IV is always Z. Antibiotics is one of the ones they want us to be precise on the start time. So you can see when it was started either by the nurse documenting on the order itself or from when it was taken out of the dispensing cabinet, which would show up as a discontinued order with the type STK med in the patient's profile. If you're in the middle of an order and you don't want to exit out, to check, you can get to the med list, again, like I mentioned before, by clicking on the EMR and then the medications. The STK meds will show up here as well. If you want to change the dose time, you can do that. But first change the frequency to Q24H at 2100. No zeros. All right, what am I doing wrong here? Usually, then you could put an @ sign here. I don't know what the problem is. Sorry, it usually works. Maybe just the test doesn't have it. But anyways, if you put a time in there, actually, my mistake. You put the time into this field, and from then on, it'll print the MAR with that time. Okay. Okay, so the stop date calculates automatically once you enter the start date, and you don't need to change it unless there is a different duration specified. So if that's the case, you can put it in here for 5 days, and then it'll recalculate. Then you need to note the duration, of course, in the label comments. You would type 4 or 5 days. If there is no duration specified, the label comment is reassess before stop date. So there is a pre-built code for this and a few other label comments. To look them up, hit the F5 key when your cursor is in the label comments field. You can click on the drop-down menu or type F9 to scan all the available comments. But again, this contains a lot of other facilities codes. So Riverside's all start with the letter L, so you can narrow it down there, but there's still a lot to go through. So the best thing to do is just to memorize the few codes that you will be using. For antibiotics, the easiest thing to do is F5, type stop, and enter, and that brings up the label comment automatically. Okay, so I'll show you a couple of the label comments. When you're entering any oral narcotics, so let's say we want to put in Statex 10 milligram. Let's say we're going to enter 2 milligram, oh no, not 2.5, that's a quarter tablet, PO. ID PRN. So tab or click into the label comments, F5, and the code for short-acting L is LHIR. So they want us to specify whether a medication, a narcotic is, and this is only for narcotics, not for other long-acting meds. So they want immediate release for something like morphine. For any long-acting formulations, the code is LHCR for controlled release. Put that back in there. Another label comment that just was added recently is LH Bank. This won't show up in test yet, but they wanted added to all vancomycin orders as a reminder to contact the physician for trough levels greater than 20. So that's it for pre-built label comments. Now I'll show you a few specific drug entries. So first off, KCl infusions are entered. These are found by typing in potassium, which will bring up all the different concentrations and solutions. So let's say I want KCl in a liter of 2/3, 1/3. Order type is Z. Leave the 20 in here. Frequency field, just put a period in there and then type at, and whatever the rate is, so 150 mil per hour. So that's that. Normal saline infusions are not entered, but saline locks are. Just finish up this one. So for saline lock, just start typing in saline lock and you select the 10 ml size, type Z, everything else defaults in, so you just F12 to file. Okay, so if the doctor orders a HEP lock, we only enter that if the patient has a central line, which requires a phone call to the nurse to check. If there is no central line, just enter the order as a saline lock. Injectable morphine. So we select the 10 milligram per mil amp. For this drug, I'm told the nurses dilute the vials to 1 milligram per mil. So to avoid confusion, we never put the actual dose into the dose field. We always do it as a 0 dose. So 0, and then you type in your dose. So let's say 2 milligram. If it's not IV, you can backspace out of here, F9, and select the appropriate route. Let's do sub-Q IM. Frequency can be searched as well. So if you get a frequency, well, first of all, we can search this, and the list goes on and on if you're not sure what to use. If you get an order for Q1 to 2H or Q3 to 4H, they want it entered that way and not just Q4H or Q1H. So if we go Q1 to 2H, PRN. For injectable narcotics with a small frequency, like every 1 to 2 hours, they want some extra empty space to print on the MAR for documenting. So the way we do this is to go into the label comments and just hit period and enter. So you get a whole bunch, 6 to 8 of these, and that should be good. So we'll do an insulin sliding scale next. Just select the regular insulin, type a Z. So put a 0 into the dose field, tab or enter, and type in sliding scale. F12 closes that. If the order has a frequency, then enter it. And if it doesn't, just put a period into the frequency field. So this shows up as a ward stock item, and we need to 0 this out. Again, so it doesn't mess up their inventory. A couple of other drugs like lactulose and some inhalers also show up as ward stock. So just make sure the dispense amount is 0. And always, if you're filing the orders and it comes up with a label automatically to print, then you know you've probably forgotten to 0 that field out. For sliding scales, they also want you to put in the dots into the label comments to allow room on the MAR for the nurses to handwrite in the sliding scale. We don't actually enter it into this. Oh, and just so you know, glucose scans are not entered. So while on the topic of insulin, Humalog and Humalog Mix, they have their own special frequency code. It defaults in when you select Humalog. So they want these dose times to be at 8:20, 11:50, and 16:50. If you get an order for Novo Rapid, They want the same times of administration, but they don't want you to use this actual SIG code just to avoid any confusion. So if we're entering Novo Rapid, and you can't remember what the dose times are, you can type in the TID Humalog. Your times will show up, and then you can put in your times at 0820, 1150, 1650. And we don't want them to dispense 27 vials, so we'll zero that out. If you try an F12 out of this screen, it won't, if there's a star beside either the duplicate or the interaction field, it won't allow you to do that. Override comment required. So I'm just putting in RPH into all of them just to get through this. Okay, so I'll show you a bulk item like lactulose and inhalers for a couple of other pointers. So let's enter salbutamol. So pay attention to the dose field. If you were to put 2 puffs here, it's interpreting that as 2 entire inhalers per dose. So we don't want that. So we'll put a 0 into the dose field and enter the actual dose here. Again, make sure that the dispense amount is 0, which this one is defaulting that way. So we'll save that, and I'll show you lactulose. As long as you've seen these once, it'll jog your memory next time you see an order for it. So if you put 30 mils into the lactulose, the interpretation doesn't really make sense. So 0.06 bottles per dose. So we're just going to zero that out and put in our 30 mils here. Again, make sure that the dispense amount is 0 for all ward stock items. Okay, so let's enter enoxaparin. Let's do 40 milligram type Z. So here's another one where the time of the first dose is important. So there's 2 possible dosing times, 0900 and 2100. Check the patient profile to see if you can find an STK med entry to tell when the first dose was given. If not, you can look when the order was written and enter the closest time to that. You can also call the RN if you're in doubt. So if the dose is given at 2100, you just change it here daily at 21. Okay, to enter a Pantoloc drip, Panto IV, type is Z. So 0 the dose, and then type in the rate here, which is usually 8 milligram per hour. And then you would put a dot into the frequency field. That's it for that one. Pink Lady has come up once or twice, so I'll mention it here. This is entered as a non-formulary. And then just like you would with the patient's own meds, clear this field up here at the top and type in Pink Lady in the drug title line, and again in the dose instructions. Frequency, if you have one, it's usually PRN, and that's all you need to do for that. You don't need to enter the individual ingredients or create a compound order or anything like that. So those were the most common drug-specific items that you'll see that might be different than other sites. There's a few more in my order entry instructions, like PCA pumps, methadone, that don't come up so often, but the details are there on how to do the entries, so you can have a look for yourself. Just a few more items to talk about. The first one is multiple routes. If you have an order for Gravol, PO/IV/IM, each item has to be entered separately and then linked. Unfortunately, there is no set for this, so you have to do them individually. So when I bring up diamond hydronate, you'll see for the injectables, there's two different items you can select. The one on the bottom here, this is the 10 milligram per mil is for IV use, and there's a little reminder there. That's for IV. And the 50 milligram per mil is for IM use, so it's a smaller volume injection. So we'll select that one, enter it as a Z. If we put a 0 into the dose field, the default, or it defaults into 25 to 50 milligram, which is also helpful, less typing. If you do actually need to put a number into the dose field, if it's only 25 or 50, then you don't need to worry about deleting what's in that field already, because this will override it. Okay, so the way they want the label comments worded for multiple route orders is specific. So you don't just put in like IM/PO. They want it written out to say or use PO order. Or if you have more than one, you could say or use PO or IV order. So we'll just do an IM/PO. File that one, and then we'll enter the oral. So once you have your entries, you can link them in this screen by typing in the numbers, the item numbers, so these numbers here. So we want to link items number 16 and 17, tab to the type, and type in C for concurrent. You can also link them after you file the session summary in the main screen. So order sets, we have a few that we use. Click on set and then type LH to pull up the ones specific to Fort Francis. The most common set that's used, there's not a lot that have been built, but the bowel care is most common. There's a few different ones. It can be a little confusing when you're trying to interpret an order. But the most common one is LHBR, which is what you'll select for pretty much everything other than post-op knee surgery and obstetrics. So if the order says CCU bowel, LHBR bowel routine is the one that you'll select. The obstetrics postnatal set is also commonly ordered. This one here. The set itself also contains a bowel protocol, but that part of it is entered as a separate set here in Meditech, depending on whether it's opioid or non-opioid. So the way you know is if a patient is admitted to hospital on an opioid and has ongoing opioid orders, that's when you would select the opioid bowel protocol. And so this doesn't refer to whether she received opioids during labor and delivery. It's whether she's on a regular opioid. Okay, so once you select your set, you can change the start date if you want. Discard orders, put a yes in here so that you can select which orders to include. And then here you would put a yes into whatever orders you want to remove. For the orders that are actually going in, you just leave those ones blank. Sometimes you'll get an order that is missing a piece of information, such as the strength or the dose. So you can enter the order anyway, in a way that it is flagged on the MAR so that nurses see that it requires clarification. So if the strength of the drug is not clear, or you don't, then you can enter it using the drug name clarify order. So just start typing clarify, and there it is. Order type is Z again. So let's say we have an order for Tylenol, 1 to 2 tabs, PRN, but we don't know the strength. So leave the clarify order part in there and then type in Tylenol. Sorry, we'll put the generic name. So tab to the dose, and we'll put a 0 in here. And then we'll type the drug name again. And whatever we know about the dose. So we'll put 1 to 2 tablets. If we don't know even that much, we would just write clarify dose. And our order also didn't have a frequency, so we can put a dot here. That just allows you to freeform type into this field and clarify. And then in the label comments, we'll type in what needs to be clarified. So please clarify strength and frequency. So let's say if you have an order with the dose missing, but you do know the strength of the medication, you can enter it using the drug name. So let's say we have an order for ranitidine, but we don't know how many tablets they're supposed to be getting. So here we'll put a 0 and just type in clarify. And and then put in the rest of the information as ordered, and then again into the label comments, we'll type in whatever needs to be clarified. So that way you can complete the order in DocuScripts and it won't be left hanging. And it also flags the nurses that something needs to be clarified. It's a good idea to notify the nurse by phone as well when an order needs to be clarified, and also to make a note of it in the weekend tracker report. Right, that pretty much covers the order entry items I wanted to go over. Here's a few things that we don't need to enter. So labor and delivery admission order sets are not entered, so only the postpartum set. One-time or stat orders are not entered. The hold order function is not used, so if a doctor orders something to be held, you would discontinue it in Meditech. Also on the BPMH, for new admissions, we do not enter items that have been held or discontinued. For patches, we do not enter a remove patch order. You can put a label comment in the actual patch order with a removal time. Okay, so now that we've entered everything for this patient, we can finally file the whole session. So click on save or hit F12. So no label or no print labels popped up, so we're good. So now it's time to print the labels. So the pharmacy staff goes over all the orders on Monday, and they do it using the paper copies that are faxed into the department and compare them with the labels that we print to make sure everything is done correctly. For this reason, we need to print a record of every single item we've entered, modified, or discontinued. So you can select each item by clicking on the box, or you can arrow down in spacebar, or you can type or click on this little check mark on the top, and that will select everything or deselect everything. But just keep in mind, if you do that, not to print any unnecessary orders at the bottom of your list. Then we click on print and labels. You don't need to select a printer. It already goes to the pharmacy automatically. I'm just going to cancel that. So after that, for each new admission, we print MR. So that's under the same print button and MAR. Here we need to make sure we change it to today's date. And the correct printer will default in, so you don't need to worry about looking at that. Okay, so that covers pretty much everything I wanted to show you in Meditech. All of this information is detailed with screenshots in the order entry notes document, which I'll just bring up here for you. So there's pages and pages and pages of everything that I've just gone over with you today. This is kept in the order entry tools in the Fort Francis folder in the Northwest Telepharmacy shared drive. I always have this document open on another screen while I'm doing order entry, and whenever something unfamiliar comes up, or if I can't remember how to enter something, I just do a Control F search and search for the keyword I'm looking for. So if I forget how to do a potassium infusion, I can just type that in and it'll pop up on the screen here for me with screenshots and instructions on how to do it all. Okay, hopefully that was helpful. Thanks a lot for watching and welcome to the team.